Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku. And it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. Joining me now, Colonel Douglas Macgregor. He is a decorated combat veteran, an author of 5 books, a PhD, and a defense and foreign policy consultant. He is also a geopolitical and military thinker, the one that I respect the most. He has written 5 books. His 5th book, Margin of Victory, 5 Battles That Changed the Face of Modern War, is spellbinding. I'm not a military historian, but I can appreciate his excellent work. But more importantly, I watched a video recently which Colonel Macgregor explained the folly of war with Iran, and I welcome him into the show. Colonel, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Roger.
So let's get right to it, because it looks to me, although I am a supporter of Israel, I do not want Israel to drag this nation into war. They seem to be constantly agitating for an attack on Iran. I recognize how difficult negotiations must be, but you had a very hard-hitting 8-minute video. I can't even begin to summarize it, but what are the follies of this idea that war with Iran could resolve our problems?
Well, you know, the first thing when we say our problems, I think we have to focus on Israel. One of the reasons that I have always opposed this all-out war with Iran is that I'm afraid Israel might not survive the experience. People don't seem to understand Israel is a relatively small country. It doesn't have much strategic depth. And though we are good friends with Israel, we can do many things for them. Ultimately, if they're going to survive in the Middle East, if they're going to live there, they're going to have some people in the region that they can depend upon and work with. I think war with Iran would utterly destroy any possibility of Israel building good relations with any of its neighbors. I mean, right now, Iran is very close with Egypt. The Egyptians have threatened to intervene to stop the inevitable solution, so to say, in Gaza that Mr. Netanyahu is now threatening. Egypt is being told that they will have the backing of the Jordanians, and the Jordanians, of course, have tried very, very hard to assist and support the Israelis insofar as maintaining regional stability. Syria, of course, is in turmoil, and the Turks are finding it increasingly difficult to cooperate and get along with the Israelis, given what the Israelis say they want in terms of control of southern Lebanon and Syria. In other words, Israel is, I think, bitten off a great deal more than it can actually chew. And, of course, they're turning to us and they want us to help them. But for us to become involved in the war is probably even worse than Israel's determination to fight it, because we would destabilize not just the region, but have a horrible impact on the global economy, not the least of which is the oil and natural gas market, which would undoubtedly be destroyed in Iran. The notion that we can go to war with any country and then pick out pieces and parts that we will destroy and somehow or another survive this enterprise with no damage reaching us is something that Israel can't bet on. And I'm afraid right now that the most important thing we can do is to find some way out of this impasse. And let's face it, I don't think Donald Trump is getting much assistance out of Mr. Netanyahu in that effort.
No, to say the least. I mean, I have confirmed that Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, and the White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles all argued persuasively against a strike against Iran, while there are other voices, presumably that of recently departed National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, who's now been given the consolation prize, in my view, of UN ambassador, because Trump never wants to fire anybody, nor does he want to give the left a scalp. But it is. I also notice, however, Colonel Macgregor, very slight differences in the statements of the president, the vice president, and his negotiator as to what level of nuclear activity by the Iranians would be acceptable.
Yeah, that's a hard one to determine right now. One thing is clear. President Trump has now stated publicly that he would tolerate a nuclear program in Saudi Arabia without first demanding that Saudi Arabia recognize the state of Israel as a legitimate nation state. That's a dramatic departure from the past, and one that, quite frankly, surprises me. But on the other hand, Iran is another matter. Iran is much greater power than Saudi Arabia, and Iran seems to be willing to bend over backwards to a point. But on the other hand, the Iranians are also saying, how do we know if we sign a new agreement that this agreement will last more than an election cycle? And that's not an unreasonable statement. We right now seem to be flipping back and forth like a teenager on TikTok with various positions. I mean, you and I listened to President Trump speak very defiantly during the debates when he was running for president, saying Russia did not start with Ukraine. Ukraine is at fault, but we need a war, and we need to find a way to end it as quickly as possible. If I'm president, I will do that. Well, he's tried, but he's moved in so many different directions as a result, I think, of very many people giving him lousy advice, that right now he has no chance whatsoever of resolving the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. That's going to end when the Russians decide to end it.
Sadly, I agree with you. This photo of these fools, Macron and Zelensky and Keir Starmer, the German Chancellor, the Polish Prime Minister, huddled around a table talking about a ceasefire first and then a termination of the war. I think that they are wildly optimistic. It's also true in Iran. I think the Iranians, in all honesty, Colonel, I think they're running out the clock. They want this UN resolution to expire. They can never give up their weapons. When we unfreeze their assets after the takedown of the sanctions, which you argue quite persuasively weren't that effective as I had initially thought, they still use that money to finance terrorism rather than to help their people. How viable do you see the Iranian resistance on the ground, the MEK?
Well, I think the Iranian resistance, you're talking about the people who want to overthrow Iran, they're irrelevant. Correct. I think you've got tremendous support in Iran for Shiites. If you look at where the Iranians have invested their money, it's been to protect Shiites. This notion of being a terrorist state, I think, is very misleading. I think you're talking about the Shiites in Lebanon, the Shiites down in Yemen, the Shiites in Qatar, the Shiites in the Emirates and elsewhere. People don't understand the split between the Sunni and the Shiite communities. And the sad part is that historically, the Shiites were not enemies by any stretch of the imagination of the Jewish people. If you were going to pick a state in the region that could cooperate with the Israelis long term, it's absolutely Iran, strangely enough. And that's something that Sam Huntington said when he was teaching at Harvard. Everybody who knows anything about Iran knows this is a very sophisticated and advanced society. They would like to do business with Israel. Israel, I think, has picked the wrong enemy, to be blunt, and I've said that to them whenever I've been in their country. But it hasn't made any difference. And I've had several people try to explain it to me. I've never bought the explanation. I think the two states could live very well together. And I don't think it's reasonable anymore for the Israelis to enjoy this monopoly of nuclear power and expect everyone else to reason to bend the knee to them. I think the opposite is happening. I think what we see now, the possibility that the Saudis will have a nuclear capability, I don't think that's been right.
I think we may have lost the Colonel there. When we return, I'm going to ask Colonel Macgregor about the Iran-Pakistan ceasefire, whether he thinks it will hold, and also, if we were to strike Iran, what would the Communist Chinese, their patrons, do? When we come back on The Roger Stone Show.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Choosing a bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drink that's all flavor and just 100 calories? Easy. Choosing between creamy vanilla, double chocolate, and sea salt caramel flavors? A little harder. Try the delicious new Starbucks Frappuccino light drinks. Look for them wherever you buy groceries. Start with Starbucks coffee.
BTW, FYI. Visit Nexplanon.com RN to learn about Nexplanon. It's an adjustable implant, 68 milligrams radio pair. Or ask your HCP IRL. Okay, TTYL.
I am so excited for this spa day. Candles lit, music on, hot tub warm and ready. And then my chronic hives come back. Again, in the middle of my spa day. What a wet blanket. Looks like another spell of itchy red skin. If you have chronic spontaneous urticaria, or CSU, there is a different treatment option. Hives during my next spa day? Not if I can help it. Learn more at treatmyhives.com.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back. We're joined by retired U.S. Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor. He is a decorated combat veteran, former top advisor to the Secretary of Defense. You find him at Our Country, Our Choice, OurCountryOurChoice.com, OurCountryOurChoice.com. I urge you to subscribe there for some of the most incisive analysis of both world politics and national security issues, global affairs. We were talking about the folly of war against Iran. The Chinese and the Iran clearly have a patron-state relationship. What would the Chinese likely do in the attack in the event of an attack on Iran by the United States and Israel, Colonel Macgregor?
China would long support Iran against us, and we would inevitably find ourselves in a direct confrontation with the armed forces of both of those states. And that's, of course, a worst-case outcome, but it's also the most likely, and it's something for which we're completely unprepared.
Yeah, it seems to me that it greatly misunderstands the dangers. It seems to me that the Chinese would act aggressively. This comes also on the heels of this groundbreaking news that evidently with the help of the United States, we have a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. Now, it's interesting that both the Indian Prime Minister, I guess, denies that this was negotiated with the assistance of the United States, says it was done bilaterally, but I know that Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the President were on the phone with both world leaders, both leaders of both countries, and representatives of both countries. This ceasefire appears to be holding. What is your analysis, sir?
First of all, I don't think that our intervention made much difference. I know that this is an opportunity that President Trump wants to take to score a win for the foreign policy team. But truthfully, I think these two states recognize the futility of fighting further. The other thing is that we've been getting news here in the United States about the imminent destruction of India, when in reality, the Pakistanis have taken the brunt of the damage. I think the Pakistanis have had enough. This is not going to settle the basic problems between the two states, but I think they'll avoid an all-out war which neither of them want. And, Roger, there's something else. I was listening to you and talking about the criticality of gold as we move into these uncertain times. And one of the things that we haven't really talked about is a constraint on what the president can actually do right now, and that is the fragility of our economy. We frankly are in a position today where we can't take in enough tax dollars to finance our government. And we cannot in the future do what we have been doing for years. one of the things that we hoped many of us that voted for President Trump he would do is recognize the criticality of not spending more but spending less. We really need some cuts in the budget. We need to cut defense in particular by about 50%. That's another reason we don't need a war right now, for which we're not ready in any case. Nobody wants to do that in Washington, but the truth is we have to do that if we're going to avoid total collapse in this country.
The irony, of course, is that whether you like him or not, Elon Musk, one of the wealthiest men in the country, has kind of shown you the way. He as I said earlier, uncovered not millions, not millions, not billions, but trillions of dollars of waste, fraud, and outright corruption. The Republicans have to step up, and they have to get very serious. We always give lip service to being the party of fiscal responsibility, but sorry, George W. Bush spent more than any Democrat before him. We talk a good game, but we don't really deliver, and it is essential for this economy to succeed. Yes, I support the president's use of tariffs as a cudgel to try to force our trading partners into a fairer and more equitable trade deal. I get that. We certainly need the tax cuts renewed. Anybody who doesn't support renewing the tax cuts in January is de facto therefore the largest single tax increase in American history. And by the way, the tax cuts are not just for the wealthy. They are across the board, as Kennedy's tax cuts were, as Reagan's tax cuts were, and federal revenues have gone up every time we have cut taxes across the board. The reason we have inflation and the reason we have a massive deficit is because we spend too much, not that because we tax too little. Trump understands that, but he must get all three legs of that stool put together to have the kind of economy that allows him to go into a midterm election with any level of confidence.
Well, I think that's true. There's also something else that needs to be understood, and I thought he understood this well when he ran, and that is that you have to disengage from the crises and conflicts overseas. You know, we don't need to be involved in these things. We don't need to go to war with anybody at this point, no matter how much we may not like them. This is a time for us to retrench. That means come home and deal with the problems here. We've begun to deal with the border and begun to deal with deportations, but there's still no strategy or plan for any of it. And that's where the president really needs to focus. Every president that deported millions and millions of people from this country, and Herbert Hoover was the first, he deported 9 million, FDR 3.5 million, Truman 2.1 million, and Eisenhower 1.3 million. And when they did it, they turned to an organization that you and I know well. It's called the U.S. Army. That's how you deport. You get it organized. You put a general in command. You give him the resources. You have a legal team that sorts out how it needs to be done. And that's how it has to happen. We've got an estimated 50 million illegals in this country. Now, finally, we've talked about self-deportation. Thank goodness. And there are ways to do that. In fact, you can tell people if you'll leave legally and you tell us who you were and you didn't commit any crimes here, we'll let you take your money with you. And at some point, we'll consider you for reentry. But if you don't, we're going to take all your belongings. We're going to take anything you've earned here. You're going to be treated like a criminal and deported forcibly. We need to get down to the brass tacks, figure out how this is going to be done. But right now, through our legal entry points on the borders, those customs officers, too many of them, are simply bribed to allow human drug trafficking to pass through the legal border points. We shut down most of what comes across, what intervenes between the legal ports of entry, but the rest of it is still ongoing. But there's too much money that these drug cartels have at their disposal to buy too many policemen, too many administrators, too many officials. It's a terrible situation, and we've got to deal with that. I think that's much more important than anything happening overseas, Roger.
This is where you and I, Tucker Carlson, Ron Paul, his father before him, agree. I think it is time to focus on America first. We're listening, of course, to Colonel Douglas Macgregor. Please go to OurCountryOurChoice.com. Subscribe there. Our Country, Our Choice. Always refreshing and straight from the shoulder commentary from Colonel Douglas Macgregor, one of the great geopolitical and military thinkers of our time. I recently read a book written in 2007 and I came across 2 pages about the clear thinking of Douglas Macgregor, who has been consistent in his advocacy for military reforms and to rethink our military and foreign policy strategy. Thank you so much for joining us. You're tuned in to The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Networks, and we'll be right back with investigative reporter Frank Parlato with the latest on the One Taste trial.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.